Good morning. Here we are again for the next class, which is in this class we will focus on the excuse me, I had the breakfast again. So in this class we will focus on heavy lift and basically evolve around that heavy lift as a either 1PO or 4PO or to some extent 3PO as well. What you should know about heavy lift. This is basically, I'm presuming you're not going to work for heavy lift because the knowledge I put here does not lend itself in a full preparation towards that objective. So basically, this is all about what you need to know if you are getting into a planning stage for a project, which definitely involves heavy lift. If you are dealing with the kind of logistic, basically the pattern repeats 90% like retail or whatever, you never probably will come to the need for a heavy lift. So heavy lift typically involved with the bigger cargo in terms of weight, of course. And we mentioned before, typically the break bulk ships, they have the ship gear, cranes, ship-based, mounted in old days in the center of on the main deck. Well, the center line, not center. So at least you have 1, 2, some 3, some even 4. Those standardized ship cranes, typically they are at the capacity by design, lifting each single crane at about 50 metric tons each. And theoretically, by combining the two and the two working together like this, you could theoretically elevate that to 100 tons by combining between the two cranes. But we have mentioned many times in previous classes, it doesn't really work like that. There's this thing called outreach ratio. So at the center where basically your crane's located, you extend out, right? So you reach out, and as far as your the arm of your crane, could reach. So at the tip of the out end of this arm reach, you will not have the 50 metric tons as it, So basically, the lifting capacity goes, downward as it reaches out. So if you look at the engineering drawing, kind of like a map, you would see a big circle on the outside, which is basically when the crane turn around it, presumably 360 degree. And that's the big circle outside. And then you have a smaller circle, and the smallest, right? So the further towards the center of the smallest circle, supposedly, theoretically, the lifting capacity gets greater. And then for the two cranes to work side by side in you call it combo, or there are many words to describe, but basically two cranes working together, jointly lifting one thing, the same thing. When that happens, you also need to give some consideration the space, under the crane, right? I said earlier, the more historical grandpa generation ship cranes, they located in on the center line over the main deck. But over the years, people realized they need this maneuvering space, so they changed and moved in the newer heavy lift ships. They moved the cranes to the ship, side. Obviously, we have a special term for it, but I don't need to get in there. Just remember, to the side. So that why? Because when the ship, docked, on the port side, and then this is the dock, this is the ship. So if you have the crane over here, right, it turn around, and this is the crane arm. It moves. It's ideal. So why didn't they think about it at the beginning? Because when you have the weight all heavily, distributed over a single side of a ship, people are worried about what would happen because with all the weight on this, right? Your crane arm goes out, outside the ship and reaching to the dock side, right? And then lift things up. What happens this time? All the weight basically lifting from here. So if you have we'll talk about the shore crane, but basically when you have a crane, all this weight heavily concentrated here and distributed back, it causes the imbalance. So it is a good engineering design to make sure when the crane is not located in the center or on the center line of the main deck, but on the side, what's there to keep this ship crane cause weight shifting, to keep the ship in balance. So we're not getting into that. That's something naval architects they're trained for. So just that you understand, heavy lift ships, their ship cranes are not on the center line locations, but more on the side, where they call port side. Okay, so that it's easier to operate. So that's that. To go with that, of course, anything above and beyond 50 metric tons, that ship can technically be qualified as the heavy lift ship. Okay, so you walk on board a heavy lift ship, you would notice the ship cranes, they're not on the center line once again, but on the ship's side. And you can tell. So even if you don't know the particular lifting capacity, which supposedly should be marked on the crane. Okay? So about this ship crane, they're not all the same. They're very traditional from very, very old days. I believe when I came into the maritime industry, there were still some older ships back then, especially in America. The ships that were 40-some year old, I think, left over from the last Great War. Those ships, the crane, they're not like the crane today. It was called derricks. So basically, you have one pole, and that's basically there to support everything. And then you have two poles on each side, basically put the ship derrick hooks under or at the tip of that pole to lift things up. So basically you move this around like this, and that was all replaced. I don't see them anymore except for in the maritime museums. So the crane today, which you see, is kind of like you have a guy sitting in the cabin, right? Operate this thing, move it around. It may not be the crew member. In most cases, it's not. It's the people working on the dock. They come in and they use the ship gear, and it's free for the people who paid for the loading service, and then the people on the dock, the laborers, longshoremen in America, would use it, and it's okay. So, but there are different kinds of cranes today still on ships, which is very rare. To my best knowledge, there's only one steamship line around the whole world actually have what we call gantry, which is basically kind of like this in shape. Okay, this is the kind of crane just move on the tracks, going out, come back in, move in single direction. And of course, the hook is there too. I guess the good part of that engineering-wise is the weight is very nicely, evenly distributed on both sides of the ship. And then the weight is in the center. But what kind of cargo actually fit for this? Only steel cargo, okay? Bundled steel or coils or whatever, but steel cargo. So that particular steamship line, they use this kind of crane on ship. And this ship is special too. In typical cases, dry bulk ships, which is bigger than break bulk ships, they don't dry bulk ships. They don't really need a crane per se. Sometimes they have some little symbolic, for the auxiliary task, but not really for cargo handling. Because for break bulk ship, basically what it is, there's no like a two decks or twin decks, in the ship hull structure. It's just a big, single deck, right? So it's basically conveyors or whatever else to these drop things into the cargo hold. But this particular case, this is the type of ship I guess we call it the Panama size. Okay, so when you have the Panama size, which basically well, they have the handy size, which is smaller, baby, and go all the way up to ultra, like it's 300,000 metric tons. Okay, so Panama size is smaller. The reason is compared to the 300,000, but way bigger than the handy size. But Panama size ship, the reason it's called Panama is this is the kind of ship can pass through Panama Canal. Any bigger ship than that, you can't go through the Panama Canal. So you're gonna have to do a lot of deviation on the sailing route. So anyway, enough of that. The particular steamship line I was referring to actually have the Panama-sized ship, sometimes a little smaller than that, and put this kind of a special crane that otherwise you would only see them like around the manufacturing places or construction site, or sometime on the docks, commercial docks. But the only case in this case is, they're situated on or located on the Panama size dry bulk cargo ships. And so this is what we talk about, basically. Is that kind of, crane over the dry bulk ships, heavy lift ships? I don't think so. I never checked with any of my colleagues or counterparts, but I would say heavy lift ship typically have they're either twin deckers, meaning below the main deck there's another deck to separate the deep cargo hold from the upper. Okay, this is called twin decker. And then some companies, and I like that, some companies actually have tri-decks. So this, instead of separate the ship from the like a 4 to 5 meter upper hold and the 5 to 6 meter lower hold or deeper hold, they actually separate into 3 layers, and each about 4 meters in the height of this, between the decks. Why would we use that, or where, or how and when we use that kind of tri-deckers? Tri-deckers, until this Chinese company rolled out with brand new ships, I believe about 10 of them. It was a long time ago, before I went into Maritime Academy. It was that old. So people abandoned that. I like this new Chinese ships because not all the cargoes are, that bulky. So sometimes you have the weight that's not so bulky. So think about it. If it's single deck, you have the one square, okay, big map, and you basically lay them there. What happens between, the space between under the main deck and above your cargo, if you have a lot of space empty left there? That's not the utilization in optimization, is it? So if the cargo overall, and I did have that kind of cargo let's say the LNG trains, which is the word for plants. Imagine all those big super rectangle stuff. They were under 4 meters tall. Okay, the height, dimension, height, weight, width, and the length. So if I hire a ship, provided the weight still satisfy the carrying capacity of the ship, by charter one ship, I can actually put a lot more things in there, can I? So that's why you use the tri-deckers versus twin-deckers. To my best knowledge, the whole world, only one steamship line, which is COSCO, the Chinese shipping company. They have 10 ships of that kind of design. I was trying to get one time. It was not available because they already deployed them on the certain trade route in the regular services. So they cannot just pull it off and say, okay, here's available for you. Nah, it didn't work like that. It would be ideal. It would have, saved me several $1 million in the charter. So anyway, that was just something I thought I need to share with you. And back to the point of heavy lift ships, again, we know it's going to be, break bulk ship, no dry bulk, right? So difference is at least a twin decker, if not tri-decker. And more importantly, the crane lifting capacity, right? Typically, at least if you're qualify yourself, as the heavy lift ships, at least you got to have 100, 150 metric tons per crane lifting capacity. 250 is no big deal. There are quite a few steamship lines. They have their ships, the lifting capacity at about 700 metric tons per crane. One big one, last time I checked, but I'm off from project for already about 5 years, so I'm not very up to date. But last time I checked, probably 5 years ago or 6, there was one ship came out with 1,300 metric ton lifting capacity with the ship crane. Wow, that's my kind of ship. I love that kind of ship. Being a maritime graduate, I cannot, I guess, hold myself back from boarding the ships with certain unique designs and experience the technical evolution. I was one time on a Chinese ship. This was designed as a commercial ship with 4 propellers, which is typically a Navy ship, design. And this was designed by the Germans, which is kind of interesting because consider most of the ships are, built by the Chinese, but this was built by the German. And then I went, on board the ship and then went to the bridge. Look at everything that they have the panel. They don't have what typically, you go, on the bridge and you look, the things that look familiar. I was lost. I didn't see anything that resemble, even remotely what, from the days I was at Maritime Academy. And I was really impressed, really. It was all electrical power driven, okay? Really nice. And that was a semi-submersible ship. Very good. So back to the point. My breakfast. Okay, so you gotta have the big jumbo, well, not necessarily always jumbo, but a heavy lift ship crane and either twin decker or tri-decker. So after all this repeat, I think you already got the idea what a heavy lift ship is, right? So, but does heavy lift always involves ship cranes? Not necessarily, because what we just described was called a low-low, lift on and lift off. But there's roll, right? Roll on, roll off. And the roll on, roll off, and I mentioned this before in the class, which is the ocean carriages. But roll on, roll off does not necessarily limit to the ro-ro ships. It could be semi-submersible, okay? So in this case, would be a tugboat, okay, drag a little trailer. Well, it's not trailer, a barge, a barge, and then put, let's say, the top side or even entire oil offshore rig on that thing and drag it, and then put it semi-submersible with, this is the, water service level would go down there and then take that from the barge. And why? Because the barge can't work at a much shallower draft area. So anyway, that's a different kind of roll on, roll off, right? So, but that's all within the category of heavy lift. So let's see. I need to go with, because some students say you need to stick with the book, structured or whatever. Oh, now that we're on this subject, I think I'm going to repeat. You can read what I put in the PowerPoint there, right? You want to read through the whole thing, or do you want me to put some, relevant real business cases so make some sense? Or do you just like, oh, I'm a copycat. Whatever you put there, I can't remember. Okay, let's just put it this way. You're not my kind of student, okay? Because in the real world, nobody's going to ask you to recite it, whatever, unless some guys just like a Shakespeare so much, like a, what did it, do you know, what was the thing in that the Venice Merchant? Can you give me a few recited, verse from there? That kind of guys, I barely met them in the real world today anymore. So, we already talked about the differences between the low, the row, and then when do we use ship cranes, and what is to know about it? Well, the ship crane, remember, if you use the ship crane of the ships that you chartered, that's free of charge to you at no cost, right? Of course, you want to use ship crane if this is already low in your plan, not a row ship. And for you to know that, here's something I think you need to learn. Not necessarily maritime graduate that not automatically know this. When the because the terms basically put the burden on the shippers to provide their cargo under the ship hook, right? So how does that work? Let's say it's by truck, right? I don't care if it's a heavy haul or just a regular truck, but here's the crane sitting here, right? And your truck go here. So this can be picked up from your truck. Imagine on the dock, there's a long queue of trucks. So if you are really good, in your own business of this line of trade, what you want to do is make sure you first look at what they call stowage plane, meaning, basically you got like this big ship is kind of like a 2 or 3 story building, right? You want to put all the things in there like a warehouse. You need to have lots of considerations. One, for the weight, weight distribution evenly. You don't want to have all the heavy things on this side and the bulky but light things on the other side. Guess what? That ship turns, especially when it goes outside, away from the port, and out there in the open water when it's this, typhoon season in that very powerful blow. And this ship barely was on the balancing out. And I personally know people actually sailed on those ships, failed in the stowage plane, and luckily enough, my friends survived. But a lot of his fellow seamen did not. Okay, so that weight distribution is very important for the stowage plane. And of course, on top of that, you got to have the best utilization, optimization, and the space usage and all that. So anyway, back to the point. You got to first look at the stowage plane. Okay, the stowage plane actually dictate certain loading sequence, what goes in there first, what goes in it, later. So you have a manifest for the ship, for the very voyage, what cargoes, and then you hire the. Today, of course, even 40 years ago, there was a software for the stowage plan, but today's easier job. But still, you need to review the stowage plan, and then you realize what goes in first, and then there's a sequencing order. So if the trucks arrive here, they're not in the same sequencing order as the storage plan dictated, what's going to be the problem? Because it's chaos. Oh, where's that one? Where's this one? So typically you would hire a port captain way before the ship arrives, basically sorting through the whole thing, make sure they're all lining up in order. But you don't always have those trucks arrive just in time in your perfect plan. So what happens, you want them to put them on dock. Okay, so when it comes to that, point in the sequencing order, put the truck to pick that up from where it's temporarily transitionally staged, and then join the queue. That's how it works, right? So this is the preparation part. Now, even more importantly, and this has a lot to do with the heavy lift. Not all cargoes are heavy lift, right? But when you do have the heavy lift, you do need to know two things. One, you gotta have the heavy lift related, I think it's called heavy lift drawing, provided by the manufacturer's design engineer. What it is, they're gonna tell you, let's say this is a piece of capital equipment. So on top of the capital equipment, you will have the lifting, points marked out. Let's say 8 of them, lifting point. So you would rig, okay, your springs or cables, whatever you call it, or ropes, and how do you, wire them through? And all goes to either 1 or even 3 spreader bars. If you just lift this one piece of equipment with one, directly hook up, that's one lifting capacity. But if you do it through the spreader bars, wires through a certain way, each way offers different capacity. So if you go wire them to a spreader bar and have the spreader bar hooking under the ship hook, you can lift even heavier. And sometimes you have 3 spreader bars, 2 on the lower layer and then 1 on the top. And then here's the ship, crane hook. That you can probably maximize their lifting capacity. And this is in the case I mentioned before one time in Shanghai, China. I sat there 4 hours going through this drawing, heavy lifted drawing, and then the heavy lifted plan, okay, to match them up. And I was very specific and persistent on how the heck you do with all this lifting points. Why? It matters, okay? Because you know what the ship crane lifting capacity is, and you want to make sure it works. And you don't plan on the completely full capacity. You got to leave some margin, safety. So we talked about the heavy lift drawing. The heavy lift drawing, if you don't have one, okay, insist from the shipper, hey, where's your heavy lift drawing? Because when that thing is over 100 metric tons, you better have a better preparation. Because chances are they could mess up, okay? Because today, around the world, a lot of, we call it longshoremen in America, but other people call it dock workers or stevedore or whatever. Well, stevedore, not necessarily the longshoreman, but anyway, the labor handling. Excuse me again. So you have the drawing. Why do you need the drawing? You turn around, give the drawing to the steamship line you're ready to hire. Okay? So here's the drawing. You are mandatorily required to turn in your heavy lift plan. So they're going to tell you. So what's that plan? Oh, of course, remember we talked about tackle point, 8 or 10 on that equipment. They have that in the drawing indicated. So they're going to tell you how they're going to wire, what kind of a spreader bar, blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, not all ships have the spreader bar, the proper one, available on their ships, on board the ships. Not always, okay? Some manufacturer like GE, they roll out their big engine products with the spreader bar, and I think that's a very responsible way to do it, because if you're trying to find a spreader bar in a hurry, you may not be able to get it in time. Of course, GE charge you for that. It's smart. I mean, that's a win-win, right? You don't want any incident happen to that thing. So we talked about the lift drawing and the lift plan. So after the lift plan, anything else to go with it? Of course there is. The procedure, how to operate this. You have the drawing, the plan, the heavy lift procedure. Why? Because you think the seamen on board that ship, they're going to be the one operating? No, it's going to be the local labor, wherever that load port, discharge port is. They're going to be the one, right? So how do you make sure they do as per that procedure? That's where you have the port captain, what they're coming in for, right? If you got a really good port captain, one, he's got experience, he's got eyes. Oh, no, stop right there. That's what I did, okay? I don't have the port captain title, but I did. I stopped operation many times because when I see trouble, I can smell it. Stop. Let's go review. Is this what I agreed? If it's not, you better stop. Otherwise, you're going to get fired. So stop right now. That's what I did. Would all the port captain do that? I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, they take pictures, so far out in a nice little shadow area away from the sunshine, and they report to you after the fact. Like, oh, I'm an eyewitness. It happened. Okay? So, that's that. Let's see what else we need to cover. So, what if you're working, which happened to me, you're working with a ship, nice ship, except for the crane. It's not heavy lift crane. Not by design. Well, sometime, when the market is really to the favor of the ship owners, the steamship lines, you don't get to pick what you have, okay? How they say it? Beggars don't get to choose. Even though you pay them, you're not beggars, but you're still beggars. You're at the mercy of the steamship line, what's available for you. So you have to work it out with the regular, steel breakbulk ship, just not the crane that you need. Up to a certain degree, okay? Not all the way up, applicable. Sometimes you can use the shore crane, which is very rare case, because shore cranes, they are wimpy, okay? If you find a 50 metric tons shore crane, it's already good. Because typically those container, cranes, they cannot work with breakbulk ships. Even if you want them to, hey, their lifting capacity is not up to that. It's even wimpier than the regular breakbulk ship gear lifting capacity. So if we can't find the real good shore crane, and some people, they're very creative, they say, what about a mobile crane? You know what's a mobile crane? They look like a truck with 4 wheels on it. Those things, for big equipment, oh my, you don't want to get yourself in trouble. Don't even think about it. Okay, mobile cranes, in most cases, they're no good, except for they're especially designed by the heavy lift company. Then those mobile cranes, yes, sometimes they have very good heavy lift capacity. And beyond that, we mentioned the float crane. Float crane, well, I also mentioned in 2 classes about Big John in our Texas Gulf area. She's constantly working between New Orleans in Louisiana, and then Houston, constantly on hire, okay? But even Big John, I believe 300 metric ton, if not 400. Anyway, not very, very impressive. It's way better than the regular breakbulk ship crane when it comes to heavy lift, if she's available. Not all the ports have the float crane. Like I mentioned before, in the class of ocean carriage, Chile, Brazil, they ain't got no. Okay, you work in that area, and you need a float crane. You need a mobile, some float crane, maybe from the United States. That'll be a long voyage. Okay. So why, as a chartering broker, I always did the practice that no other chartering brokers do was the side survey. Okay, because I went in to check out, one, do they have what they say they do? Remember that case I talked about in Thailand? I asked for the certificate, which is everybody asks, okay? And this parties, multiple parties, okay? They all submit officially in black and white. They do have the certificate. And you're saying, I need this certificate, A1 class. Oh, what else classification you want? We'll produce them for you. So can you take their word for it? Not certain countries, okay? There are countries maybe, fine, I'll just take your word for it. But there are other countries, no. You got to go there yourself to check it out. And I'm so glad I did. Nothing was for real, okay? So that's why you need to go there, check it out. What kind of crane? Oh, you tell me you have this, not. Yeah, that certificate was basically for the original design. And then they bought it second hand. Nobody gave them the, updated, certificate. So were they lying? No. 1,000 years ago, yes, it was certified for that. Well, today, we forgot. That is something, if you're on a heavy lift job, you better check out. Let's see what else. There are other things that is something you need to know about what's so-called GA, general arrangement. Okay. General arrangement basically is a kind of like a drawing, kind of like a map that gives you all the details of a ship. Okay. So the physical dimension, lifting capacity of the gear, everything's there. So if you're a good chartering broker or a good 1PL, 4PL, when you have a ship that you intend to do the charter, you always insist on the GA, okay, from the steamship line. Say, hey, give me the GA. They know what you're talking about. They'll submit to you right away. Of course, if you look at it and you don't know what to do with it, then forget it, right? But hey, I hope you always work with somebody who does know better. Let's see. We already covered the outreach ratio and still plan we did. And oh yeah, here's something. The stevedore, okay, the companies that's contracted to do the loading and unloading, don't presume they're in the business profession, they know what it is and they know how everything works. A lot of them, funny part, a lot of them in the developing countries today, they don't have this so-called backward business knowledge. Because why? Containerization has been in the shipping industry since 80s. And it pretty much dominate the mainstream of shipping. So the stevedores around the globe, a lot of them, they know how to do the container. Of course, they better do, because today in 3 docks in China, 1 in Netherlands, it's totally humanless, okay, totally automatic. So of course they know how to do that. But today it actually becomes a challenge. Do you have the qualified stevedore with the relevant experience handling breakbulk, especially heavy lift breakbulk? So that you need to make sure, and that's, I guess, worth it to either have a port captain or somebody. I'm presuming you're not a maritime graduate. You don't know how to do that. So you hire a local port captain, check it out, and give you the report. Okay. Uh, Otherwise, these guys, they have no idea how to handle heavy lift, and your ship arrives, and they're like, let's find out. I actually had that case in Shanghai. I was physically there. This ship, for one layer on the bottom for the cargo, 9,000 cubic meters, right? On the surface, it's not cubic, it's square meters. After 6,000, that's like a 2/3 of the capacity of the ship. They told me they couldn't put it in anymore, and I got really mad. What? What do you mean by that? Take everything out and redo it. And they did. Eventually, the man did put it in. Why? Because those guys, they had no experience. They just sloppy, just put it in. Have you ever heard of something called stowage plane? Are you telling me in entire Shanghai, nobody knows what is a stowage plane? Do the stowage plane and go with the plan. Do it again. It worked out. You don't want to fall into that situation, do you? Okay? Remember, I'm a maritime grad, and I actually work for steamship lines, steamship agencies, the stevedores. I have all that in my background. If you don't, you better have this in your plan. Check it out. Have the local port captain, a really good one and loyal one. The one has a professional pride, basically would not tolerate himself for a sloppy job. Okay. I'm not gonna talk about the tally, demurrage, all that. That had nothing to do with heavy lift, okay? So I'm gonna move to the PowerPoint now, and let's go over there, okay? We're 42 minutes into the hour. So heavy lift players in the basics. When it comes to the heavy lift players, right here, where University of Houston is located, we have 3 qualified players. I'm telling you responsibly because on my project, I always, do my procurement, screen out those not qualified, let's just say. So 3 qualified in Houston. 2 of them are local players. 1 is global player. Don't get fooled by their reputation being the biggest one, okay, around the world. Sometime, and I did caught them one time in Houston, the whole office of 40-some people reduced down to 2 sales guys. They were not qualified. I scratched them off from my list, okay? The 2 local players, they know way better, and they took in the guys split from that bigger company, joined them. They got even better. So if I am doing the consulting for a project like this, I will tell you, the heck with that big guy. Until they put the qualified staff, in the local office in Houston, they're on your blacklist. Okay, so the handling expertise and experience, if you do have experience yourself, I guess at this point, if you're my student, you don't yet. If you have that experience, you need to do a raw survey. Basically, starting from where the construction site or job site is, going all the way to where the landing port or point, if this is a barge on a river, it's a landing point. Or the discharge port, you got to go through, okay? Because there are things, if they're supposed to go over the land after, swap transshipment from the landing point of the barge or something like that, you need to make sure the whole route, how do they set up the crane? Remember, each time they set up the crane, they charge you. And on this project I was on, I'm not going to name the company, that's a $7 billion project. There are at least 10 points they need to set up, reset up. First, it's the money. Second, it's the time, okay? They set up this crane, put it over, let's say it's a rail track. They have to, basically get over that part. And then another track. How much time do you think it's going to take? And it's not just the time. When you have too many number of handlings repeating itself, the chances of incident increase dramatically. This is why back at GE, we didn't want any transshipment, okay? Because each transshipment gives me like, oh, I don't know if you can sleep well at night. You know how the big companies are. Sometimes they are real assholes. They would, you won't have a life. You don't want to work for those guys. The handling equipment and the, well, I already talked about all that. So that page is over. Lifting gear and related concerns. Shore-based cranes, what's the concern of that? Well, you gotta have the patch under the shore-based crane. Why? Because this patch is basically redistribute the weight absorbed, you know, from the crane. That's while it's lifting the heavy lift. You don't do it right technically by the engineer's design and the calculation. What would happen is this short crane, once you know, pick up the thing on the other side, this short crane, and it happens in Korea, in China, a lot of places, even Japan. Okay, what happened? Somebody messed it up in the process. Okay, ignored. So I guess we covered a lot of it already. Yeah, actually I did. So this page is done. So various geographic positions of geological conditions of heavy lift operation. Sounds like a tongue twister, doesn't it? Okay, so riverbank landing points. Why does that even matter? And this again is one project that I actually worked on. Okay, so the thing was to be discharged at the Freeport, okay, which is deep water port, and then transship from the ocean carrying vessel to a barge, right? So the barge would go along the domestic water on the river. I forgot, San Jacinto, whatever, one of those three main rivers here in Houston or Texas. It came in, and then where do we have the landing point set, right? Does it matter? Yes, it does. Okay, first, the draft. Of course, you don't want to, because on this project, I got a logistic company drafted a proposal for the EPC and sent me, said, I need to budget $3 million to do the, basically clear the landings point intended, and the draft there is really low. So they need to do the dredge job, okay? And I'm like, I don't believe that. $3 million for nothing. The river's so long, right? So even just say could have the closest access to the construction site, there's still places I'm sure you can do. So in my inquiries among the 8 logistic companies that I called in to submit their proposal, this was number 1 on my list. I said, okay, I'm not going to tell you what I think, but by your experience, do you think this dredge, is necessary? So all the 8 come back and say, no, it's not necessary. That's what I thought. What I didn't know was specifically close to that landing point, proposed by that logistic company, where was the one that last used and how big, how heavy that was. And this 8 company, they all had that experience. They know. Okay. So $3 million money saved, and let alone if you want to do that job, the time, right? So that's that. That's about the landing point. Of course, also for your stuff so heavy to get over the levee, you don't want to, mess up stuff there. That's the jurisdiction of U.S. Army Engineering Corps. Okay, you don't want to touch that, baby. So how do you do that? that part comes from the very experienced and qualified heavy lift service provider. Okay, so directly from the barge over the levees I just mentioned, straight off the fabricator sea docks, that part is actually easy. A lot of them, let's just say, because in these days, South Korean, very specific one place, okay, they always get almost all that kind of jobs. So their dock have about like a 6 meter draft. So if you can push anything in there right next to their dock, they have the gear, they have the experience, they just push their thing to your semi-submersible, whatever it is. But 6 meter draft is not good enough for break bulk, okay? Here's something like a tip I would share with my students. That's my own experience, which has always worked out perfectly. And I strongly recommend you copy me. I would, and I always did, okay, create a heavy lift requirement and portfolio. What does that mean? Because if you're just a one PO, sit here, hey guys, take care of it. And they're like, take care of what? So at least you need to tell them this. First, you give them the manifest, the packing list, if you have, okay? Tell them exactly the physical dimensions, 3 dimensions, and the weight. That's the number one. And then you build a portfolio. Tell them exactly where is the loading, where is the discharging, and the construction site, the location, the coordinate, and everything. So they have to look at the map and the route. You ask them to propose. Okay, propose what? How am I going to handle this? And then, if you're not very educated on that to be able to tell the difference, well, at least you can compare between 3 different proposals. I just mentioned around Houston, we have 3 qualified, heavily, service provider. So compare their notes. Call them in, make an appointment when you're available. You don't care if they're available, but they're not available for you. That means they don't take you seriously. You're off. Yeah, that's how it works. So tell them I'm available within this time frame, and I hope to see the people from your company that has the technical authority and also can call the shots. If not, I don't have time. That's how I always do. Okay, so they bring their whatever management people coming in. I don't like to talk salespeople because they say, yeah, we have always been doing that. No problem. Hey, man, don't try to fool me. I was in sales 4 years. I don't take any sales pitch for planning purpose. So, nevertheless, you have the proposals, qualified proposals, you compare. And you call them in and say, okay, this is not your idea. You don't really know what's going on. But you use the thing from their competition. Say, okay, this is supposedly argument, and tell me why this is not right, and use the same thing against the other one. Okay, so in this process, you learn a lot. By the time this project is finished, damn, you are gonna be the expert in your entire company for this kind of thing, right? That's how you learn. Okay. The first time I was supposed to do, the purchase for 30 million US dollars, the company of Costco, the president of the Costco company told me, hey, Wei, go spend this $30 million. Sorry, $30 million. I'm like, I don't know how to buy a truck. Oh, I don't care. That's your problem. So what I did was I had 10 European truck manufacturers coming in, and they all had a proposal. So I used their, because they all attack others, try to get ahead of the competition. So I use all that as the argument and ask them to address. Okay, this is the argument against you. Tell me, why do you think I should dismiss this? That's how you learn. So by the time I finish that job, I learn a lot more. Okay, so the briefing presentation. So we did all this homework, and so we call those qualified service party in. This is, of course, the process of procurement. And I do a briefing presentation, which would be you as my student if you get a job like that. You do the briefing presentation, you tell them what's the situation, here's my portfolio, and I'm distributing to all of you, and this is my requirement for your pitch in proposal. And then you have, after you did that, you have the RFP, request for proposal procedure going on, and then there's a debriefing presentation of the plans and proposals by those qualified service provider. They're going to tell you, this is what we're going to do. This is what we see as the challenge, and this is how we're going to address that challenge, overcome that. And, you number those number of challenges from party A and party B, party C. Then you find out there's always some challenges, somehow, missed by some of them. So then you get pretty much whatever you didn't think of, either because you didn't have experience or you didn't have time or you're just not a good worker. But now you have all these concerns, basically collected and how they are addressed. Once again, you can use one against another. I don't mean to play politics. I do mean technically you don't have that expertise. That's the only way you can use it. And then there's a Q&A session. Of course, in this case, you're actually talking to them after their presentation. Say, okay, we reviewed your proposal in plan and your presentation, and here are our questions. Please address. After the technical part, it's all commercial questions and answers. So this is about the heavy lift drawing from the fabricator or manufacturer. Okay, I already talked about that. So basically, I don't think we need to repeat here. So heavy lift plans by the logistics service provider. Okay, so once again, we're repeating. The heavy lift drawing always comes from fabricators, making sure they're available. If you're the logistic manager or logistic specialist, and you ain't got no heavy lift drawing for the heavy lift cargo, it is your duty to talk to your boss, who talk to his boss or her boss, and make sure this thing becomes available for, through the purchasing channel. And then once you have that heavy lift drawing, you gotta send this to whoever you're trying to hire through charter party or booking those. Provide that lift drawing, ask for the lift plan. That's your job, okay? If you wanna take it the easy way, it might just come back and haunt you miserably. So port captain or marine inspectors from project insurance underwriter. Well, we talked about this before, didn't we? About the insurance. Basically, they will go over this. So if you don't have this, they'll make sure you do, okay? And do respect their expertise, in that regard. So we have the YouTube video. We're almost 6 minutes into the bottom of the hour. We have the YouTube watch here. One is for the largest crane in the world. Oh, largest crane in the world. That's the title of that YouTube. Okay, search and look it up. The other is ALE, transportation and cranes for Thai growth. That's the second video title. The third one's called Mamu Crane 1,800 tons heavy lifting system. You gotta watch that. That's amazing, that baby. That's basically, I believe today is the highest, record set as far as the heavy lifting capacity. So all these three, I strongly recommend you watch them all. They're not that long. But if you don't, that's okay, at least one. Okay, turn in your assignment and we'll review that. I guess this is the last. That is the official course contents. I'm gonna record one more that was not scheduled, but I still want to go ahead and do it. That is only for your reference only. That's about the operation research and how does that work with business logistic, meaning, separate the military logistic from that. Um, because the military always use operation research, okay? So I want to add that into the recording as the last one to wrap up the entire semester, of this course. That operation research part is not mandatory. It's really for your reference, and the video will stay on my YouTube channel. I personally believe it has been in logistic, and I will talk about it in the video why it did not do a better job in the business logistics as versus military logistics. So if you are going to be in logistic, and I don't care what, it doesn't have to be oil, upstream, downstream, or mining or heavy industry. It could be any logistic. I'm telling you, any logistic operation research has its place. But I don't believe it's for undergraduate as the required course. But if you're thinking of pursuing a next degree, along this line in the same scope, this is kind of preparation, a going away gift from your instructor to the students for free. Okay, so you watch it, you don't, and I'm not upset about that. I don't expect 100% turnout on that one, but I'm only doing it because I guess out of my self consciousness there. I wanted you guys to learn things and prepare you, even though some of you may not think it's necessary. Well, it's up to you to decide, okay? So stay safe, be good, okay? You do have your loved ones around you. If that's true, I hope you think about them and stay safe, so don't cause them any problem, okay? Ciao.